office. I'm very happy to say that this panel discussion is organized in cooperation and partnership with our good friend and the Warsaw security friend, the GMF, not only the Warsaw office, GMF, full stop. So Michał, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kasia. If I could just invite everyone to sit down as well, because we have a fantastic star panel to talk about the little issue of U.S. presidential election and the choice of the next leader of the free world. I'm going to jump right in with a very brief introduction of our panelists. We are now less than 2 weeks before the elections. The stakes arguably could not be higher. In fact, we often here in Europe feel like we should all have a vote in this election, given the impact that it has on all of us, not only on the people of the United States. This has been particularly contentious, many would say ugly elections, that will impact what happens to political culture in U.S. afterwards. And it's all happening while, as we discussed in the previous session, the Western international liberal order is creaking and under extreme duress, something that Madeleine Albright during the NATO summit described as an incoming decade of instability and disorder. So the next president of the United States, whoever it's going to be, will have a tremendous challenge of not only pulling the U.S. together, but pulling the West and the international liberal community together. So let me turn to our panelists. Let me start with General Breedlove, who absolutely needs no introduction, but I'll mention that anyways, you are now, as you wanted to say earlier, Zbyszek pointed out, Mr. Breedlove, but we will remain referring to you as the General. A former SACEUR, but also someone who has been ready to fight at the Fulda Gap, as you told us yesterday. General, I want to turn to you with a question of, given what happened during the campaign, but also the challenges, what kind of U.S. leadership do we need?
So let me just start and weave a short web before we get there. As a much younger general officer, I served in our Strategic Plans and Policy Directorate on the Joint Staff. And part of my responsibility was in South America. And I was traveling in South America at a time during another fairly contentious election. And I was asked a question by a very senior military officer from one of the South American countries and a very senior political leader. And the question was very simple. What will you do if the wrong president is elected? And I took a moment to assure him that as a military man and our military men and women, this is pretty straightforward. There is no such thing as the wrong president getting elected. The nation elects a president, and the military serves its political leadership. And I sort of recited our oath of office, which points out very clearly we don't swear allegiance to our president or anything else. As a military man and woman in the United States, our oath of office says that we swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and all the things that the Constitution lays out. So there is no such thing as a wrong president to a military leader. But I may be the only voice of positivity in this discussion, but let me also say that I have great faith and confidence in my nation. You all probably know it even better than I, but the three parts of our government, the judiciary, the legislative, and the executive, were created to balance power and to bring stability to the way that our nation is led. And so I do not have some of the concerns. I've answered probably 50 questions already in the last 2 days about this very subject. I don't share some of the fears that I see out there because there is a lot of inertia and there's a lot of balance and a lot of good in our nation's leadership structure that I think will see us through a lot of challenges and has seen us through a lot of challenges in the past. Now, I get to your question. What do we see post-election about American leadership? I want to share some of the sentiments that I heard from a great SACEUR. We have at least one great SACEUR in the audience or in the room today. And he talked about that just a moment ago in the same way that I kind of see it. We have come through, we're not through yet, but we are going through one of, I think, the most divisive electoral periods of my history, of my memory. As a young 61-year-old, I can't remember anything more divisive in the past. And so first and foremost, after the election, it's not about U.S. leadership in NATO or other places. It's about us getting our nation on track, getting our leadership internal to our nation on track, so that then we can meet the expectations of the larger world. I do believe, having been the SACEUR through some pretty interesting times, that American leadership in NATO is very important. But it is one of the leaders in NATO, not the leader of NATO. And there are other great nations that have to step up. In my time, one of the best examples I ever saw was during a defense ministerial. And I saw in a matter of less than 48 hours, Ursula von der Leyen put together an attempt to have a great maritime response in the Aegean Sea to that flow. And I saw how a group of nations, not America, put together an operation, gave us a mandate, and then we as military people had ships and planes moving in less than 36 hours. So America's not the only leader. Other nations are very important to the leadership. So I just back up to answer your question. Post-election, I believe we've got some internal work to do to get our house in order, to try to bring our nation closer back together as it has been pushed apart during this electoral process. Reestablish our leadership. We need internal leadership. And then we can be a very productive part, I think, of what we see after the election in NATO.
Thank you very much, General, and I'm glad to hear your optimism, and we certainly count on you. So let me turn to Evelyn Farkas, who is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, but also served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia and Ukraine, and also served as the Senate Armed Services Committee where Senator Clinton served. You speak in your private capacity, but we have a hint that you know a little bit of secretaries.
I'm also from New York State.
Oh, there you go.
And their home is in my hometown.
Ah.
I didn't tell you that earlier.
No, that's a surprise. But that's
even the moderator has to be surprised.
Even better then. Evelyn, I do want to ask you. I mean, the elections are 2 weeks away, but we just looked up one of the best pollsters before the panel, 538. Many of you know it, and it's now calling the elections 16% for Donald Trump, 84% for President Clinton. So we're not going to say that this is not a done deal, though the margins are larger than they were before Brexit. But given your familiarity with Secretary Clinton, what can we expect in broad strokes from Secretary Clinton if she wins on November 8th? Maybe even kind of if we can dive a little bit deeper also to the regional issues and questions around Russia that is very much challenging the European security order. But also, you know, what would be the priorities for President Clinton if she's in fact elected? Over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, and thank you again for inviting me here. I should thank the Foundation and all of the other organizers and sponsors of this event. I think the most important thing, first of all, I have to say is it's not a done deal, as you said, and so to the Americans in the audience, please vote. And not only vote, but get everybody to vote, because I really believe we need a landslide. We need an absolute repudiation of everything, all of the policies that Donald Trump has put out there. I'm not afraid to be political. I'm not hiding who I'm rooting for. And I think it's very important that we continue to press forward until Election Day and through Election Day to make sure that we have the right result. I do agree, however, with General Breedlove that even if we have the wrong result, from my perspective, America is resilient. We have a lot of presidential historians who have put forward very coherently the argument. They've given us examples of all of our horrible presidents in the past and the fact that we've endured, and we do have a strong system of checks and balances. And actually, if Donald Trump were elected, I believe he'd be impeached pretty quickly, or somebody else would have to take over government. And I'm not even joking. Having said that, I think that there is a vacuum of international leadership, and I do think that Hillary Clinton is well positioned to fill that vacuum because she does understand what's at stake. She knows that the international institutions and the rules that the international institutions support or are supported by the international institutions actually are very important to the United States and to our allies because they protect our values, our way of life, democracy, free market economy. And I also believe that she will assert that very clearly. So one, she will have a very clear message about what America stands for and what we, together with our allies and partners, stand for and defend. Number two, I believe that she will be assertive, and she will not only speak assertively, but she will take action. What does that mean? Certainly in the European context, it means deterrence, a strong deterrence of Russia. I think it's fairly accurate. I'm not speaking for her, I should be clear, and I cannot prognosticate about exact policies that she will further or that she will pursue, but it's fair to say that her policies will look to a large extent like President Obama's, but I think that she will execute them more firmly, at least when I'm talking now specifically about deterrence vis-a-vis Russia. So it'll be largely the same, but probably a more firm approach vis-a-vis Russia. That is not to say that she will not be pragmatic and measured. She will. And I think that because she will have a stronger position, a deterrent position vis-a-vis Russia, she will also be able to have a better, more open, and direct conversation with Russia about strategic stability issues, including nuclear security issues. Because we have quite a dangerous situation right now in Russia where their military doctrine and their capabilities could lead them to real miscalculation and escalation with the United States and with our allies. And so I believe, understanding that, she will also be able to have a more, maybe not constructive or productive conversation, but an open dialogue so that the Russian government and the Russian military understands the dangers of miscalculation and what's at stake. We can get into that more in the question and answer. That's probably enough from me, but I guess I like to end with my punchline that you've heard me say before, but I think if Secretary Clinton becomes our president, then she will make America lead again.
Thank you very much. That's a good note to finish on. Let me jump around a little bit. Let me jump to Minister Olechowski, Minister of Finance, former Minister of Finance, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, co-founder of Platforma Obywatelska. Minister, even though you're speaking on your personal capacity, I want to ask you from a perspective of whole of Poland. And maybe the region. What do you expect and need from the next President of the United States? And how, to the extent you want to share, you weighed the choices that are before the American people?
Well, let me thank also organizers for inviting me to this conference, which is very impressive. Let me also say that when I talk with my American friends, I also ask them to elect us a good president, But I believe it is very important that we do have a capable United States president because it will be a momentous presidency. The time is very, very difficult. Very much at the very early stage, the new president will have to say if he or she wants to perpetuate the current world order, which is 70 years old and cracking, dangerously cracking in many places, or will she or will she or him want to strive for the new world order? And secondly, the new president would need also to define the way United States wants to intervene, is willing to intervene in various regions of the world. When you look at the candidates, there is no doubt who's more apt, who's more capable of being, from the point of view of foreign policy, of being United States president. Donald Trump, for him, one of his slogans is everything is negotiable. This is not how you want to fix world order, if this is your instinct. He's not holistic, you could say. He's case by case. He doesn't have much respect for the signed treaties and obligations of the past. Mrs. Clinton is a person that we know well, and she is respected and trusted by many in the world. But in the process of her campaign, she took distance from some of the tools that were seen as necessary to fix the world order, such as Trans-Pacific Partnership, and I wonder how she's going to replace them. What sort of substitutes will she find for them? Unless she will find a way of somehow getting back to her earlier position on them. Now, when we come to Europe and Poland, European order is also cracking very dangerously. You could say that European integration is in some sort of a limbo now. This was the principle. This is a cornerstone of European order, the gradual integration, gradual in the sense of covering more eras, but covering also more countries. And now we have two big European powers, Russia and Great Britain, which said they don't want to play this game. They don't want to be involved. So that cornerstone of European peace and order is gone. We have to find a new way for that. I believe, though, and I think that whoever it is, Mrs. Clinton or Mr. Trump, they will not be very engaged in European affairs. And rightly so. We're grown-up people. We are pretty wealthy. So it's up to us and for us to fix our house and bring the new order. So in some respect, you could say, in the interest of no, that would be too much to say. I think I'll stop here.
Thank you very much. And I would love to hear also perspective from our, in response in a second, from our American speakers. But let me turn to Professor Gilboa, who's, your focus is very much also U.S.-Israeli relations. And needless to say, Israel is a key partner and ally of the United States and vice versa. I wanted to ask your expectations, both for Israel but also for the whole Middle East. This is clearly going to be high on the agenda of the next president of the United States, whoever is chosen. The relationship, even though it's so important, it's not always smooth between your two nations. So, Professor, over to you for your perspective.
Thanks for the invitation to have the opportunity to speak to you this evening and to share my views with you. Thanks for this outstanding question. The expectation in Israel And I may add that this is also true for American Arab allies from the new American administration. In one word, change. In two words, a major change. The feeling in the region and elsewhere has been that somehow the United States is no longer interested in the region, that it wants to withdraw, that it leaves a vacuum that somebody else is feeling, and that as a result of it, there are huge problems, and we can see that, for example, in the Russian intervention in Syria. The United States resigned from the position of a world policeman. There's nobody else to replace the United States. How do we know that? I think that an unfortunate phrase coined by Ben Rhodes at the White House during the failed NATO intervention in Libya. And he said that even before that intervention brought a disaster to Libya, he used the term leadership from behind. The problem with that phrase is that it's oxymoron. You cannot really lead and stay behind. Either you lead or you stay behind. The problem with the new administration, I think, is that there have been too many zigzags in American approaches to major problems, challenges, from the so-called Arab Spring through the rise of ISIS to the Russian recent intervention in Syria. I'm saying Soviet because of the kind of conversation and rhetoric that we have heard recently from the two sides reminds us about the Cold War. They even use terms that are taken from the Cold War. So in the last 8 years, it was very unusual for an American president to face one Israeli prime minister. Both were elected almost at the same time. It's good when you have good relations. It's bad when you don't have good relations. And during much of those 8 years, there were major disagreements between Israel and the United States on major issues, such as negotiations with the Palestinians, and especially the Iran nuclear deal. And so the expectation is that, these disagreements are not going to emerge again, and that the personal relationship between the Prime Minister and the President are going to be improved. Because not only the United States and Israel disagreed about major issues, there was a very strong personal animosity, which I think the two sides have contributed to it, and that even more strongly marred the relations. Secretary, in terms of the candidates, we don't know from public statements what they intend to do. Donald Trump, I think, don't know what to do right now. So if you ask me what he is going to do, I don't think he does know what to do. Hillary Clinton has a record. But unfortunately, during the election campaign, the two sides prefer to talk about sexual misconduct and email messages, and we have not heard much about positions about the Middle East and perhaps global foreign policy. The expectation is that whoever is going to be the next president, and it could be Hillary, which is a combination of Bill and Hillary. It could be Hillary. Obviously, Bill Clinton is going to be just hosting dinners at the White House. And this might be a very interesting type of leadership exercise at the White House. So the expectation is that there's going to be a change in the basic approach to leadership, that the United States will develop a vision for the world from which particular policies are going to be drawn for the region. And that the feeling will be that there's an effort to project power and influence, to be interested, to clarify interests, who is on our side, who is against us. There were too much confusion about that issue alone, and this has been clearly shown with Syria. One more point I want to make. Despite all the disagreements at the political level and the diplomatic level between the Prime Minister and the President, President Obama, Obama has not even touched the close relations in intelligence, strategic cooperation, and security. And I think this is quite important. Just a few weeks ago, and I think this was a major step forward. Obama and Netanyahu signed a memorandum of agreement to supply Israel every year $3 billion for 10 years. It's called foreign military aid. I think it's more of an investment. But I think this has an important message for the entire region. It says something about American reliability and commitment. And my final statement is this. I've been invited several times to all kinds of countries, most recently to Asia. For example, South Korea and Japan. And I was asked, what is going on in American-Israeli relations? And I asked myself, why do you ask me? And the answer was, oh, you are the closest friends on earth. And we are observing you to learn about what we can expect from the United States. So American-Israeli relations have become a measurement of American commitment and reliability to other countries as well. So what I'm saying is American foreign policy in the Middle East is crucial for any establishment of power, influence, and credibility elsewhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we certainly look at each other as the allies of the United States. We have a lot on the table already. We have to go back to some of these questions, but because of time, I do want to make sure that we have chance for interacting with all the smart people in the room. So let me take a couple comments. There is a gentleman in the back row there. We cannot hear you.
Okay. I have one question, very simple, for members of this panel, the same time to the previous one. We all can see that something happened. Something happened in America, in Europe, in the world of liberal democracy, in the world of political ideas. So what has happened that political forces which were in the margin of the politics so far now became a mainstream? Something happened. Maybe it's a natural circulating of elites, as Pareto put it, but maybe something happened much deeper, much more important. So that's my question, if I please.
Thank you very much. Let me take one more question because we won't have that much time. Ambassador Fried, if I can see properly, I think so.
Well, a question for Ms. de Hoop-Scheffer on Russia policy, because that clearly is going to be an issue for the next administration early. I don't know what you mean by a global rethink of Russia. Does that mean we shouldn't try to cooperate with Russia in those few areas where we think we can, or that we shouldn't push back on Russia when it invades its neighbors? I don't know what a global rethink actually means in practice, but I'm always wary of abstractions in foreign policy because that often means that somebody else's country is placed by comfortable Americans and West Europeans on the wrong side of a line. So I'm wary of that. For Minister Olechowski, I almost always agree with you, so it's painful not to, but I do think actually that the next US administration will want to return to Europe and a strong European relationship, maybe under the guise of rebuilding the West or the great democracy, strengthening the great democracies. I think there is a market for that, and having seen a pivot to Asia not work out so well, I think that there will be an interest in doing so. At least I hope so.
Thank you very much. We are bursting with the agenda points actually already on this panel. So let me go maybe for a second to General Breedlove and Evelyn, or maybe Evelyn and General Breedlove, to address those questions. I know you wanted and let me throw in to the first question the importance of values and internal politics as the next administration is thinking through transatlantic relations.
Okay, I'm slightly younger, so we'll go youth before wisdom.
Absolutely.
So first of all, I would like to say that I agree with my colleague Dan Fried that the United States is not moving away from Europe, and if anything, we need to stick closely together with Europe because everything that is at stake is also at stake in Asia. I was in Japan I don't even know, the weeks go by so fast, but a month and a half ago roughly, and they have the same concerns there, and as our colleague mentioned, with regard to leadership and standing up for our principles. So, you know, what the first questioner asked was what happened, and I think what happened is that you have always in every domestic political landscape this nationalism, this populism, even fascism in almost every country in the world. But if you have strong liberal democratic leadership, if you have voices to speak out against those forces or to counter them effectively, then they don't come to the fore. And what I said earlier in the beginning when I spoke about the vacuum of leadership, that's the problem that we have right now. And I believe very strongly that regardless of what kind of ethnic composition we have in the United States, because it is becoming increasingly less European American, we still have very strong shared commitment to values with our European colleagues and with our Israeli colleagues, and together we need to work on the international front to counter the forces that are pushing against our values and interests. So I think that's long enough, and I will turn it over to the wise general.
So I just want to respond to two things the ambassador brought up in his follow-up questions. I would argue that the return to Europe has already started. And so I'm not looking for the next administration to begin the return to Europe. We've made some significant improvements in our investments, our rotational policies. We're bringing some of the best capabilities in the form of our newest kit into Europe now. So I just want to characterize that return, I believe, has already started. And again, I seem to be the optimist today, but I am buoyed by what I have seen so far. And there's great momentum in our Congress to continue with this. And as I mentioned before, there are three parts to our government, and the Congress is a very a large part of that. Now I'll be a pessimist for just a moment. I really get worried when we start talking about some sort of a relook about Russia, because my great fear is that we'll try to start from a brand new place. And by starting from a brand new place, we will legitimize some horrible behavior. We do not want to legitimize what happened in Georgia and in what is happening in Georgia almost on a daily basis now. We do not want to legitimize what happened in Crimea. We do not want to legitimize what happened in Donbass. And we certainly don't want to legitimize what's happening in Syria. So any restart or any movement to try to find a new way forward with Russia, I think has to start with good behavior on the part of Russia. We need to move forward in that way before we begin to move forward in any others. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Thank you very much. Let me take one more question, and I know that both Alexandra, everyone will have a chance to respond, but let me take one more question if there is a gentleman right straight behind. Then, yes.
Thank you. My name is Commander Wiesław Grdziewicz. I am the legal advisor at the NATO Joint Force Training Center, and I need to take NATO in defense in response to Professor Gilboa's statement about Operation Unified Protector. Yes, I do agree that the end state was far away from what one would expect in terms what happened in Libya. Yet again, please bear in mind the mandate that has been given to the operation. Protect civilians with no foreign occupation troops on the ground. How do you protect civilians when you can only deliver air power? That's one of the basic questions that no one can respond to. And by saying that, I need to admit that, and General Breedlove will most probably back me up on this one, that the OUP was an operation in which NATO had to act contrary to its own concept of comprehensive approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are out of time, unfortunately, so, well, almost, not entirely. So we'll go back to the panel. Unfortunately, no more time for questions. Minister, let me start with you. There was one very specific question raised by Ambassador Fried, but feel free to address any of them.
I think it is naive to expect and to appeal to United States for the leadership of a type that we know from the Cold War or even from George Bush time. United States is not willing today to provide that kind of leadership, upfront, full-fledged leadership. It needs partners for that. And if I understand well American public opinion, it is not isolationist by all means, but it's not also interventionist. It needs focus. It needs probably to be convinced that this is in a true, deep United States national interest to do things outside the country. I have no doubt that United States and Europe will remain close partners. This is the deepest relationship in the world, which is between United States and Europe. If you take investment, if you take civilization, culture, science, everything, this is the strongest relationship. But I'm also sure that United States will continue to be supportive and engaged in the security era. But now we're talking about the partnership in rebuilding world order, in strengthening or repairing at least world order. And then what is important, when we say we have to define it. Who are we, Europeans, now? Is this European Union? Is it European Union plus Great Britain? Is this individual countries? We have a work to do. And we may have good intentions. We may speak from our heart. We may see a lot of merit in cooperation. But until we fix that here in Europe, and United States will not help us very much in that. Until we fix that, we won't be a worthy partner and the most important partner for United States in arranging, so to say, the world.
Thank you. Alexandra?
take your mic again. Thank you. So two answers to two very good questions. The first one, which was not answered yet, is how do you explain these populist movements, which is something that we obviously share with Americans. It's a really profoundly transatlantic phenomenon. It's not just about Trump or Marine Le Pen in France. I would basically say it's a crisis of confidence between political leaders and citizens. The feeling that political leaders are completely out of touch with people's daily concerns. And Trump is really surfing on the wave, just as Marine Le Pen is surfing. And if you are looking at what really characterizes in Europe these populist movements, it's anti-Brussels, anti-American feeling, anti-TTIP, of course. And if I could make an analogy between both sides of the Atlantic, I would say that Washington is perceived by the American people very much as Brussels is perceived by French, German, Polish citizens, something that is really far from their concerns. And I think the parallel here is really true. Today, François Hollande, our French president, I think has a 4% or 5% popularity approval in France, which shows you the really disastrous disconnection with the French people. So I think this is really something, a phenomenon, a crisis of confidence and mutual understanding between political leaders today and citizens. The second question on Russia, I was not calling for a new reset. I think the word reset will probably never be used, just as TTIP will probably disappear from our vocabulary as well. What I really wanted to flag, and it kind of also complements what has been said by the previous panelists, is really that we have to understand that all of these issues are interdependent, are closely interlinked. And that is to say that if we deal with Russia in Syria, it has to include a conversation of our relationship with Russia in Europe, and it cannot be dissociated. And that's why I was saying, in my opening remarks, it's really important that Europeans are also included in the dialogue with Russia in Syria, because we are also part of the process. And we have desperately tried to say, Ukraine is a totally different issue from Syria. Let's not link the dossier. But Putin has done that from the very beginning. And I fully agree that, this terrible red light episode in 2013 sent terrible signals to Japanese, South Korean allies, to European allies, to Israel, to everyone who was saying, but so what's happening? And the question then was really, can we really count on U.S. leadership? And to start doubting about U.S. leadership, can we really rely on them when we really need them? And the French president was, really number one ally ready to strike with the Americans. I mean, this is really a problem for, I would say, global affairs on a general standpoint. So this was really my remark, just as we have tried to compartmentalize Iraq from Syria for Libya. And obviously, this has to be, again, redefined in a much more regional policy. We're heading towards that, but it's coming slightly too late. Sorry.
Professor?
First response to NATO. The NATO's military intervention in Libya was a major disaster. Yes, authoritarian leaders such as the Shah of Iran, Muammar Gaddafi, and Saddam Hussein, terrible, terrible leaders. But look at what happened after they had been removed. In Iran, we are still suffering from that Islamic revolution. And in Libya, we are now returning to tribalism, and the number of people killed on daily basis and wounded 1,000 times more than in the period of Gaddafi. And you compare that, and Iraq, Saddam Hussein was holding Iraq. What happened after he had been removed by the US invasion of Iraq? Now look, where perhaps a military intervention was required, and this is Syria. 500,000 people killed, hundreds of thousands of people wounded, half of Syria, of the Syrian population, refugees. there was very, very slow response from the beginning. I'm still arguing a huge disaster that has affected the entire region. Also, I want to mention, Muammar Gaddafi dismantled his nuclear weapons program. And when the NATO and the United States killed him, I think it increased the motivation of Iran to seek nuclear weapons. Second issue about those fringe groups in the United States coming to rule the country, I share all the observations that were mentioned here. Two others. Many segments in the American public, they could not accept an Afro-American president. And secondly, it seemed that in the eyes of many Americans, somehow he has been seen as taking America too much to the extreme liberal left pole. About Russia, the problem with Russia, I think, is, as I just suggested, it's a cost. It's cost. Russian provocative behavior, both in Europe and in Syria, have not been sufficiently assessed, and the responses have been seen and perceived as too weak. Now, when you look at Russia as your partner in Syria, and you negotiate all kinds of agreements that you know in advance that Russia has no intention whatsoever to implement them, this sends the wrong message. So I think the way for the new American administration, for Europe, to deal with Russia is still to increase the cost for unacceptable behavior.
Thank you very much. Evelyn, over to you. And if I can both ask you and General Breedlove in your remarks to address any of the issues that were raised, but also we are talking about a lot of the needs from US for leadership, but given that we are in Europe, tell us a little bit what do you expect from the European allies?
Okay, well, actually, that works very nicely because I wanted to talk about Syria. First of all, since you had started by asking me what Secretary Clinton's policies were likely to be, with regard to Syria, she has said clearly that she supports a safe zone. Between now and January 20th is a lot of time. So what I ask is that people here in Europe keep in mind the example that General Breedlove gave us where the German Minister of Defense, obviously upon the direction of her chancellor, came to NATO and asked for NATO's help in organizing a maritime response to the situation in the Aegean. I think it would be very helpful if our European colleagues also showed some leadership with regard to Syria, our Israeli colleagues as well. We welcome all comers right now because for the United States, we will be in this lame duck period, and it is unacceptable, frankly speaking, morally, for us not to try to do something at least to alleviate the suffering of those people in Aleppo. And if nothing else, give to the White Helmets or some other organization. I'm sorry to be so impassioned about this, but really, there is something that we all can do. And I hope politically we can also come up with a way forward. But at the minimum, we have to start by alleviating the humanitarian suffering and then to come up with a comprehensive solution, and others have said it already, but I will just reiterate one aspect of it because my government has chosen to split off the fight against the terrorists. So there's the regional that Alexandra mentioned, but there's also the fight against the terrorists, splitting that off from addressing the civil war in Syria, and I believe that that's not tenable. So that's what I want to say about Syria. With regard to anything else the Europeans can do, I think General Breedlove can cover it, but obviously to maintain, adhere to the same democratic principles, free market economy, to work with us, to help us together, meet us in the middle.
Thank you very much. General Breedlove.
I've been asked a couple of times, since this is about the fourth time I've spoken in the last 2 days, I've been asked a couple of times about the thing that worries me the most. And I think that's how I will answer what would I look for the Europeans to do. What worries me the most is not about our military capabilities and capacities. What worries me the most is the solidarity of our alliance. If we continue to have a solid alliance, if we have a strong demonstrated commitment to our Article 5 collective defense, And it was explained wonderfully yesterday in the German Marshall piece about individual nations' responsibilities under Article 5, which is often forgotten, that each individual nation owes its individual best to the nation that is threatened. And that answers a lot of the questions about commitment. But what would I ask is that from the Europeans, a strong commitment to that solidarity, because there are certainly nations to our east that want to split this alliance apart. If this alliance is split and the decision-making capability of this alliance is ripped asunder, then our concerns to the east, all their questions are answered and all their goals are met. But so I would ask that Europeans help to lead our nation as well as we come out of a very contentious election to remain very solid, rock solid on our commitment to what our alliance truly stands for. And if I could just throw one last plea out there, the conversation about Libya, I see this many, many times. The young commander, I think, is defending the military action in Libya, and to the degree of what the military was asked to do, the NATO military, it accomplished all its goals. Our fellow speaker is speaking to the larger failure of NATO in its response to all the other things that needed to be done in Libya. There are many elements of national power. What was applied in Libya was the military element, and there was almost none of the diplomatic, informational, or economic that has to accomplish a military task. And so I always try to be the peacemaker in these conversations. The young commander is absolutely correct. In a military sense, the military accomplished every single thing it was asked to do. In the larger sense of how NATO responded to Libya, we didn't do so well. And I think that both gentlemen find their way to the right answer in that respect.
This was a fascinating conversation. Thank you very much. We wish you all the best on November 8th. Fingers crossed for the people of the United States. You know, the joke normally is vote early, vote often. It's not as funny this time around, given that a rigged election is probably the most scary claim that one can put forward. But please join me in thanking our fantastic panelists. And I'll pass the mic.